Matrix, Willie Miranda.
Heather Arnold, a Syracuse University graduate, left a 15-year television career in Los Angeles and Manhattan to study tour company in Aruba. Her commitment to historical accurate tours led her into years of research, fieldwork, and archival study, uncovering evidence that the early history of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao had been suppressed. Her work explores the island's original identification as the Islands of the Giants and the existence of advanced matriarchal society with elongated skulls. Heather currently owns Ancient Aruba Adventures. I'd like to welcome to the Paradigm Matrix, Heather Arnold. Heather, how are you?
Great, Willie. Thanks so much for having me on your new show.
Well, let me tell you, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to have you here. And we could talk about the Island of the Giants. I think last time we spoke on the Paradigm Matrix when I was at KCOR.
Yes. Yes, I think I was on that show twice with you.
Correct. Correct. Now, have there been any changes since we had our conversations regarding any new discoveries?
Well, yeah, the most recent one, I think I just actually heard about, I believe it was in April, I think it was. At the Archaeology Museum here in Aruba, they had a scientist. I guess she was an archaeologist. She's more of an anthropologist. She's a German woman but she studies at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. And she, for her PhD thesis, did genetic testing of the giants. So not necessarily of their giant stature or anything like that, but more trying to gauge where exactly the giants came from. So she studied the archaic DNA, which is the giants. That's about 7,000 years old. And then the Cacateo. And the Cacateo came onto the island. They were not originally from Aruba. They came from somewhere. And that's what she wanted to find out. And they were at one point coexisting with the giants. And what she uncovered was that the giants, interestingly, there is a breakaway civilization of the giants. It's located on the border of Venezuela and Colombia. And that is where she found the most genetic match with the people of Colombia and Venezuela. So, as I had always thought, the giants came from the south and moved north onto Aruba. And the Cacateo were always thought to have been Venezuelan. So this is kind of interesting. But she determined that they were actually closer to the Taino people than to the people of Venezuela and Colombia. So that was quite interesting because, the people of Aruba really thought that their Native American roots, were from South America. And now they're learning that they were from the northern part of the Caribbean. They moved down, the Cacateo moved down into and onto the islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao. So that was quite interesting. It got a little heated even during the discussion. It was at the Archaeology Museum.
Oh, wow.
It was a presentation. Yes, I was the only American there with my daughter, who's actually Aruban and American. So I asked a lot of questions about other things as well. But the Aruban people who were there were kind of like shocked. I think maybe it was their first foray into seeing how archaeology and anthropology is a lot of a guessing game and not necessarily a science. People think that archaeologists and anthropologists are scientists. They're both social scientists, the social sciences. So there is science rooted in some of what they do. For example, the DNA testing, carbon-14 dating. But in theory, they are doing theories. They are creating theories. I mean, it's a lot of conjecture. And so the people were really shocked and pushing back and asking a lot of questions and saying, like, why do you have to say that, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, they were getting aggravated with her and taking out all this anger on this poor anthropologist who just came from the Netherlands to present her findings, which are rooted in science. It was interesting to see that type of reaction. And it was also, I think, beneficial in a way, particularly for independent researchers, in that now the people of Aruba, or the ones that were at least in that room, now get an idea of what we're dealing with on a daily basis when the archaeologists, anthropologists say, this is it, and this is the story because we're the experts, and this is the conclusion we have reached. We think that this is the conclusion, the accurate conclusion, and then to find out that after all that time they were completely inaccurate and they were essentially just guessing. So it really puts a lot of things, upside down in terms of even artifacts that they attributed to the Cacateo. Now I think we're really even more ancient and maybe attached to the giants. And so that a lot in the archaeology museum, which they say are from the Cacateo people, and they were from Venezuela. Now we find out they are not from Venezuela. So it really uprooted a lot of long-standing guesses that the archaeologists proposed as to the origins of the giants and the origins of the home of the Cacateo, at least the direction in which they traveled from. So that was actually a big update that we have recently had with the giants, and that was with the DNA testing. Interestingly, the Bonaire skeleton, which is the largest giant and most complete giant skeleton ever found here in the ABC Islands, the ABC Islands being Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao, which are all sister islands, and all had the same giants. That also was DNA tested, and we still have not had the results of the DNA analysis. So I wanted to ask about the results of the Bonaire skeleton within this room, but it got so heated and people were starting to ask a lot of questions regarding their roots and why they had been told one thing and it was clearly not what she had discovered. And plus, I don't like to put a lot of heat on the Bonaire skeleton. I don't want a lot of people to necessarily know about it, or especially with these guys, these anthropologists, archaeologists, even though I know they know about it, but I didn't feel it was the proper setting to bring it up. But we are still waiting for the DNA test results, and that was why I wanted to independently test the Bonaire skeleton's DNA to determine its origins, its age, etc. But I didn't ask that question. So, but because I haven't been able to independently test the Bonaire skeleton on my own, we don't have any results. And that was always my prediction, that we would never see the results of the DNA testing of the Bonaire skeleton. So, but at least we have some more interesting theories as to the origin of the giants. And knowing now that they came from the mainland of South America, it actually raises even more questions. I mean, just because the genetics of the archaic giants correlates to the mainland Colombian Venezuelans doesn't necessarily mean that's where they're from. Where did they come from? Where did they move from? They could have even moved from the Pacific Ocean into the South America. So there's a lot more that needs to be done, but in terms of as far as the research can take it at this point in time, that's where we have gotten so far. So I look forward to hopefully more improvements in DNA testing and further analysis, and also blockbuster discoveries in that realm. So that's the most recent information about what's going on down here.
A lot has happened. A lot.
Yes.
That's a huge development, especially with the advent of DNA. And I'm so surprised that they're able to still extract, that DNA.
Yeah.
I don't know if you mentioned it, but have they done a comparison study with the DNA of the giants and the DNA of the current population? in the island?
Yes, they have done an analysis, and what they found out is that in 2012 there was a preliminary. And I asked about actually this study. It was in 2012. It was 2002. Sorry, in 2002 they did a mitochondrial DNA analysis of the modern Aruban people living on the island to determine where their DNA structure, where they might have come from. Now, in 2002, we weren't as advanced now as we are in 2025, when I think the DNA analysis began, 2026, where we are now. So it was more rudimentary. However, what that study determined was that the modern Arubans here in Aruba living now do carry the giant DNA with them. So they determined that they had found this DNA. It didn't fit into any of the known DNA at that time. And so they were quite intrigued, the geneticists who did the analysis in that study, that the modern Arubans still had this ancient DNA in their bodies and part of their genetic makeup. So that was the most recent study up until when this anthropologist came to the island and discussed her findings. And I asked her about how do those findings correlate with what you have now discovered with this, revolutionary new data that we have. And she said that was very, rudimentary, as I had discussed. It was before we had many more advances, but it definitely is an interesting component. But now we actually know where the origin of the DNA is, where before they didn't know. They found the archaic DNA, they isolated it, but they didn't know where it was from. But now with all this other information and technology and AI as well, they were able to track it to South America. And interestingly, speaking about extracting the DNA with the giants, they extracted the DNA from their teeth. So a lot of the giant skulls have full sets of teeth still. And so they were able to extract the DNA from the teeth.
In other words, let's say the giants still live within the population of the people of Aruba as much as the Tainos live within us, the people of Puerto Rico, and some of the people of the Antillean Islands, because that stretch of islands is the Antilles.
Right.
So that is amazing. That really is amazing.
Pretty incredible. Yeah, so that was interesting.
Within that infighting, right, and those heated moments, I wonder if that it come across to some of those folks that, hey, this is there's still those genetics are in us,
Right.
And,
because she didn't go into the 2002 study much, the anthropologist, and mentioning about how that study had been, it was very cursory. A lot of people didn't, the people listening to the talk, they didn't even know about this 2002 study. So, and plus I had asked, I think, 3 questions at that point. So, and other people had their hands up. So I could have, even after the talk, I asked more questions of the anthropologist, of course. But yes, she should have mentioned how there was a connection between the modern Arubans and the archaics, the giants. So I think she was just so flabbergasted at the response from the people, which I knew was going to happen. When I heard her giving out the results of the testing, I knew that people were going to push back. But because there's a lot of pride here in where people are from.
Yeah, of course.
So,
of course. There's a lot of national pride. A lot of national pride. And that, that goes a long way. As a matter of fact, and that probably get anybody flustered, when you're in that situation.
Yeah.
You really have to take control of the room and really, it would have been really good to start out probably with what you said, start out with that connection,
Right.
and then it wouldn't be it wouldn't have turned into what it turned to, But
You're
Heather, did you get a
right.
chance? Did you get a chance to talk to her?
Yes. So after the talk, then I went and spoke to her because I had another question. So the other question was, in the archaeological record, there had been proposed, and this was in the 1970s, 1960s, that there was another breakaway civilization of the giants located in the caves of Cuba, and that there was an analysis done of the graves and the burials and the very specific way the giants would bury their dead, as well as the cranial elongation, the ochre on the bodies, particularly the elongated part of the cranium. And they found a lot of correlations, also the giant stature. So I asked her, was there any and she was someone who had spent an enormous amount of time and doing archaeology and anthropology in Cuba. So I asked her, I said in the archaeological reports, it's mentioned that perhaps there was a connection between the early people of Aruba, and particularly the archaics, and the people of Cuba and ancient people of Cuba. And she said there was no correlation. So none of the later period Kakateo who came to Aruba, nor the ancient archaics or the giants who were here, who came from South America, there was no correlation between their DNA and the DNA of Cuba. So that was kind of interesting as well. And then it makes you think, well, what is going on with the giants in Cuba? I mean, what is that another group of people now? Another group of giants from another part of the world? I mean, it's just fascinating. And
it is. But I think if I don't memory, trying to jog back, I think I sent you a few articles concerning that.
Yes, you have.
Yeah,
yes. Also with Puerto Rico too.
Yes. There's a lot of odd things that are being have been uncovered, between those particular islands in the Antilles that have pointed to that direction, which I pointed to the, it's not a theory. It's not, it's, the giants did exist,
Right.
Not even mentioned, but in our folklore, from from those islands, we have a lot of Taino. We still have a lot of Taino DNA in us, and there's a lot of folklore, and a lot of the Taino Indians were tall. They weren't giants, but they were tall. A lot of them were taller than the average Spaniards that came, with Columbus. As a matter of fact, many of them rebelled and actually ended up drowning the Spaniards.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
But the Spaniards just also described them, as being a little taller than average.
Right.
I mean, it's completely different when that, with the giants. I mean, the giants were giants. They're not going to call a giant if he's not. We weren't talking about 6 feet tall people here. You know what I mean? So, well,
Right.
But it's so interesting.
No, that's it. I remember you sending me an article about that too.
Yes, and there's a lot of. I think there's a lot of things that are being, discovered here and there. And I also believe that some of these things are being also maybe not that they're hiding it, but they don't have enough. They don't have an explanation for it.
Right.
Okay. They don't. I mean, who knows where these giants travel through? You know what I mean? Either through North America, down through what it is, Mexico, Central America, going to South America. I mean, and basically, end up in those islands,
Right, exactly.
As a matter of fact, the Mayans themselves were traced back to the United States. They had basically moved down south, and settled in what it is, Mexico today.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even in Georgia, the state of Georgia, there's petroglyphs that are Mayan. I've seen Mayan petroglyphs even in Arizona that were pointed out to me, in South Mountain outside Phoenix. So that's I think I'll always say the most prolific people who we probably don't even give enough credit to because we're still learning so much about them are the Maya. Because even here in Aruba, in Bonaire, in the caves in Bonaire, there is drawing that has been attributed, and here in Aruba as well, at a place called Io Rock Formation. There are drawings that are attributed to the Mayans, petroglyphs that are attributed to the Mayans. There was a research professor from the University of Florida who came down here in the 70s, and he looked at these petroglyphs, particularly the ones in Bonaire, and he was shocked. And he was an expert in Maya. He was the top guy in the whole world. He knew how to read it. He especially knew how to age the different types of Mayan language and glyphs. That there's a proto-Mayan, and then there's a later classical period Mayan language that is more concise and a little bit more structured. And he noticed in the cave in Bonaire and also here in Aruba that there were drawings that he thought was proto-Mayan, which would be the really prehistoric Maya, essentially. And so he went back to Florida and wrote a whole research paper on it, and then did an interview with the Miami Herald, the newspaper. And I actually have a copy of that newspaper article, and there's pictures of him in the cave in Bonaire, which you can still see the drawings today. Now there are bars in front of it, so they're not vandalized. But he took pictures of what he thought were proto-Mayan, and he wrote a whole thing that a report and a newspaper article to this reporter about how the Maya are so prolific and how they had even been into the Caribbean, even as far down as South America, and also, they had gone to the Caribbean and etc. But so when that article was published, the university was so angry at him because he had gone off script, essentially, that they threatened his job and made him write a retraction and an apology in the Miami Herald again, saying that he was, in order to retain his status and job at the university, and his funding for research, of course, and he had to basically say that he had the wrong information or he was mistaken, and see, it's this whole, almost struggle session just to keep his job and his reputation intact. So, and I have that article as well. So it's really sad and concerning how much we don't know because of situations like that occurring, and that still occurred to this day. I mean, that wasn't just a one-off. I mean, this has been something that's been going on a long, long time, and that was in the 1970s. Actually, I believe it was 1970 exactly. It's very sad because we don't know as much about our history, I think, or especially the more controversial things that are potentially 100% real, can not get a grasp on that because they're so hidden from us due to, needing to maintain some sort of narrative for some reason. I guess knowledge is power type things.
Correct.
So that's kind of interesting about the Maya, that you mentioned the Maya, because they probably were here on the islands as well.
As a matter of fact, going back to DNA, DNA testing, I remember there was a study done some years ago concerning the Antilles and the population of the Antilles, and primarily the larger islands, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Puerto Rico, and all the rest of that chain. And I guess the population of Puerto Rico ended up having more Taino DNA traces than everybody else in those islands. Yes. But I want to go back to, because they also, I believe, found Native American DNA.
Wow.
And that's spread all over. So there is that, I believe that Mayan, like you say, that influence spread around that entire area. The Mayan was a big empire.
Yes, massive.
Huge empire.
I mean, I've been to Belize and I've seen Tikal. I haven't seen Tikal, but I know I've seen
pyramids?
Tikal from the top of the pyramids in Belize because I couldn't get into Guatemala because it was during COVID. So I could see the top of Tikal, but I couldn't get into Guatemala to go to Tikal. But yeah, I mean that they were prolific. I mean they are very underrated and underappreciated how massive their empire was and how far they spread and how far they got with their. I mean, and even the artifacts, some of the artifacts that you've shown me that you've sent pictures of that they're still uncovering in Puerto Rico, they look like they're from almost Easter Island, which is really weird. You know, some of the positioning of the figures and where they have their hand placement and some of them I even noticed had elongated skulls. Some of these human, I guess they were humans, you know, and we see a lot of those different types of statues. Even here in Aruba, we see them here all along all in the Caribbean. These same type of body style, hand positioning with the belly button, and it's very reminiscent of Polynesian. I mean, if you showed a picture of one of these statues, I believe it was from St. Vincent. It looks just like it's from Easter Island. It looks like a moai. So it's very strange to see how, even though all the islands are so separated and Easter Island is so far away, how there are all these similar, the way they're composed, the way they're carved, the head elongation, the positioning of the bodies, the sculptures, they look very similar. And that's, you know, and then the archaeologists will say, oh, it's trade. They were trading or something like that. But I think also there's a chance these were the same people, you know, and they just spread out all over the place and carried their knowledge.
I agree with you 100%. That's what fascinates me about that type of ancient history, you know. And,
exactly.
You know, before we started recording the show, we were talking about Dennis, you know, and what goes up in you know, and the happenings up there in what they used to call Mystery Hill, now they call American Stonehenge. And of course, ancient American history is so fascinating because, you know, it goes back way before any of this, you know, like, you know, Dennis always says, you know, he spoke to some elders and they tell him, you know, did you know, you have any history on the, you know, here, you know, did your people build this, you know, but you know, no, that was here when we got here.
Right.
You know, when our people came here, settled here, this was already here.
And yes, just like the stone chambers in Putnam County, New York, there's over 200 of them, and there are no reports of the Native American populations building them. They said the same exact thing, that those places were there when they got there. And this is a common theme that you're asking the indigenous populations about things that they didn't build. Some, and in many cases, they became afraid of. They didn't even go near them because they didn't know who built them. Sometimes they witnessed a lot of, same at Dennis's site in America's Stonehenge, they witnessed a lot of paranormal activity, strange lights, beings, voices, all this activity that the people, the Native Americans, didn't want anything to do with. And sometimes they would even call them forts, like Gunjiwamp in Connecticut. That is documented that the Native American population said they absolutely did not build Gunjiwamp, and they called it a fort because they didn't even know what else it was. I mean, it's massive stone structures, stone circles, all these stone chambers facing all these astronomical events, etc.
Oh yeah. A lot of these, you know, with the little arch windows,
right?
Where you can see the summer solstice. You know what I mean? The sun coming up. I mean, it's amazing. You know? That's all math. It's all, you know. It's. I mean, these people were intelligent. Okay. Yes. They were pretty smart. You know, a lot of math, a lot of engineering. There was a lot of knowledge there. You know, that's it's probably been lost, and all that's left is those vestiges of, you know, they're in stone, so they're not going to go away, you know.
Right.
Many people think it's just a bunch of field stones being thrown around. No, they're not.
No.
No, they're not. And the
They were
energy, I
marking
don't know if
time,
you,
for sure.
yes, I don't know if you would agree with me, but when I stepped for the first time into American Stonehenge, you could just kind of feel an energy. It's not a negative energy,
No.
but
Right.
you feel
Yes.
something like, it's odd. It's hard to
Yes.
explain.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, when I was doing my show there with Dennis, before we did the show, he was running like a little bit of a tour, like he usually does. And
Right.
there was an influx of people coming in, and there was a couple I heard um, that were walking by, and they were talking to Dennis. And one of one of the girls that was with the group, she says, "Dad, I'm going to go back into the car. I got a massive headache." And he just said, "Okay." Give her the keys. And he says, "Well, that's strange. We just came back from England. We were in Stonehenge, and she had a headache over there."
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
that was exactly my look. And I turned around to Dennis and I said, "Did you hear that?" you
Wow.
know,
Very interesting. I didn't
yeah, it
hear
is
this
interesting.
story.
There's some type of
Wow.
energy. It's not negative or anything. I didn't feel anything,
No.
of course, negative or anything like that. But let me tell
Right.
you,
Right.
it is fascinating how you go around, you see the little windows, as we spoke, the stones that are set up and aligned, and it's almost like a clock, like they're using the sun,
Right.
the positioning of the sun and the stars to just, um, whether it's they were praying or they knew the seasons, you know. I
Right.
mean, they pretty much. Uh, that's like a giant clock there. You know what I mean? Like a
Right.
giant. you know what
That's
I mean?
funny
Like
that you
some.
use that terminology because in Aruba we have a place called the Io Rock Formation, and I found a dolmen that aligns with the equinox, another carved stone that aligns with the solstices, other stones that balance stones that align with other balance stones on the island. Some align with an extinct volcano that is on the island. And I called it a massive measurement of time. I mean, it's almost like the entire stone monuments, all of them collectively in this area, are just like a massive stone clock, measuring time, and particularly the times of the year when there are these changes. And here, interestingly enough, there are many changes during the solstices and the equinox because we are an equatorial island. We're essentially located
Yes.
on the equator. We're not exactly on the equator, but we are a few degrees
Close
north.
enough.
Yes, exactly. So we are considered an equatorial island, but now when I am doing more research and trying to figure out why globally were these people all over the world tracking the same solstices, equinox, supermoons, precession of the equinoxes, all these different celestial events, I'm beginning to think more and more that maybe it's with connection with particularly a magnetic pole shift, some sort of pole reversal that occurs potentially at set periods of time in the Earth's history, and that's why they were measuring it, because they had remembered or been told by their ancestors of a time when it occurred in the past, which we know it occurred in the past.
Correct.
So that's the more I because it's such an obsession with every culture, and all the cultures seem to be measuring it. I think even the stone chambers are measuring it. They're aligned to the solstices and the equinoxes and the rising Venus and a supermoon and eclipses. I think that tracking of that time within the stone with these massive stone clocks essentially was there to maintain the measurement system and also see delineations in the movement of those measurements done in the stone, which would indicate the potential of an upcoming event of catastrophic nature. And so I'm really beginning, there's someone on X called Ethical Skeptic. They're brilliant. They just published a book. I think it's called The Inversion or something like this. where they're basically talking about the same thing, that all these megalithic sites, including Göbekli Tepe, Chaco Canyon, they're all measuring these types of celestial events in order to get a warning sign that something massive and potentially cataclysmic is about to occur. And what that would be is this pole reversal, this pole shift. And and he has been tracking how there are indications that this is potentially coming sooner than later, and fits into this whole concept. The reason why Elon Musk, for example, is so crazy to want to get to Mars and start a moon base as well. Because perhaps he knows something that we don't know for certain, and wants us to have an out in case something goes down here. Also, this person on X mentions how the elites are building all these bunkers like crazy, spending millions upon millions on these bunkers and stocking them up, and so that perhaps again they are cued into the potential of this pole reversal occurring. And then of course we have the actual science which shows that the pole is shifting.
It's happened before.
Yes, exactly. So that's what I'm leaning towards now, is more that they want to warn us of something, and that it was really, really, really important to monitor these events, and to have them also in stone, so that they would be permanent clocks, essentially, to monitor these events, because they could determine with slight fluctuations how soon we were going to be on that point of having this happen again. Interestingly, here in Aruba and Bonaire and Curaçao, there has been a cataclysmic event. It was about, I think it was 500 BC was the first one, where there was a series of 3 mega tsunamis. And this, of course, is a guess. When they coming up with when these tsunamis occurred, they don't really know exactly. But the islands were once one island that were separated by the series of 3 mega tsunamis. And we often here on the island have tsunami warnings. I mean, we just had one. I was at the beach with all these tourists, and the tsunami warning system went off. We're one of the only places in the Caribbean that has a tsunami warning system, because there was a massive earthquake, and it went off that there was a potential for us to have a tsunami. I mean, I didn't even know what to do. I just thought, I'm not going to panic because there's all these tourists and they're going to panic. So I got to keep it cool. But the fact that there has already been a cataclysmic event, as a matter of fact, a lot of skeletal remains, ancient skeletal remains, have been found in the Caribbean Sea, right off the coast of Aruba, as well as additional rock formations that have been essentially sunk or submerged, probably during the period of time when the 3 islands were separated by these tsunamis. So there was clearly a cataclysmic event that occurred, and in such a way that it essentially made one island into 3. So if that is connected in any way to some sort of pole shift, or or even perhaps a comet, meteor, who knows, then clearly already in Aruba they've gone through that, and also the Caribbean probably as a whole.
Correct. And do you believe also that they were using these as far as helping them determine when to plant seeds, when to do certain crops,
Right.
when to travel? Because I imagine they're going to be crossing, the Caribbean
Right.
Sea, the Caribbean Sea. So you think they were also using that to determine when were the best times to move, to migrate,
I think, I think that there could be an argument for that. I know that, for example, we're coming up on the Harvest Festival soon. It's called Daragai. It's specifically celebrated here in Aruba. It's the moment of time when you're supposed to harvest because the dry season is about to occur. So it's generally on June 26th of every year. And so the way they were able to determine that it was time to harvest was to watch for a particular tree to bloom called the Kibrahacha. And the Kibrahacha in Papiamento, which is the local language here, means break wood or break axe. It's because the wood of the Kibrahacha plant is so strong, you will break your axe trying to cut it. And what happens is, and in a couple of weeks it will occur. Actually, usually it's about the week before or the couple of days before Daragai, the whole tree blooms in this bright, bright, bright yellow color. And at that point, the early people here in Aruba knew, okay, now it's time to harvest because the Kibrahacha is blooming. And then they would have the Festival of Daragai, and one of the colors of their costume is yellow, this like golden yellow, because it represents the Kibrahacha blooming, indicating that it's the harvest festival or a harvest time. So I think also, combined with using these stone clocks, shall we say, for particular times to maybe migrate, or when the ocean is calmer or rougher. Right now, we're in the high wind period. The oceans are dangerously high with massive 12-foot swells, etc. So now wouldn't be a good time to migrate. But so maybe they were using them for that when the winds change, or when the rainy season begins. I think
hurricane season.
I'm sorry?
Or hurricane season.
Yeah, well, we don't get hurricanes here in Aruba. We're outside the hurricanes form here at the equator, and then they go up.
Yeah.
So we're lucky in that sense, but in other islands, I know in the Bahamas they also have balanced stones, and particularly on isolated islands. I read just a whole research paper a couple of months ago about how there are these stones in the Abacos Islands that are directly in a straight line position, balanced stones. I mean, typical balanced stones. Exactly the ones you would see even here. We have one that actually looked a lot similar. I posted it on I believe it's my Instagram and my X account, about how similar these two stones are in these two Caribbean islands, one here in Aruba and one in Bonaire. I mean, the Bahamas. And that, maybe they were also, trying to monitor time. And in the Bahamas case, monitor, as you said, hurricane season.
Interesting enough, I wonder with the advent of what's going on in geopolitical world and what's going on with Cuba right now, which is unfortunate because the people are suffering needlessly, but what other discoveries could be found there?
Yes.
Because the island is pretty much isolated, and of course it'd be very interesting to see what would be discovered there. I remember watching the documentary on someone who had gone to the island and was going to the eastern part of the island where, of course it's kind of hard to travel in that island because of the documentation you got to present. So through every either municipality, you would have to, if you're crossing it, you would have to show papers, and you got permission to go here and there. But watching this documentary about this person going over there, and he was trying to find the last living, they were saying Tainos.
Wow, interesting.
Actual Taino. Yes, it was very, very interesting. And they eventually made it to that part of the island. It was in the outermost eastern part of the island where they traveled to, and they spoke to some people there that really had those features.
Wow.
Yes, it was.
Was the documentary in English or was it in Spanish?
It's in English, and I'll find it. I'll forward it to you.
Yeah, I'm dying to see it.
It was fascinating. it was really
Very,
fascinating.
yes. The two countries that are on my bucket list are Venezuela and Cuba. And so I'm dying to go to both. First of all, in Cuba, they also have strange petroglyphs, some
Yes.
attributed to Atlantis. Some believe that Cuba was part of Atlantis and was an outpost after some, again, cataclysmic event occurred. And Venezuela has so many petroglyphs and also great history, mythology, stories of the Loch Ness monster type creature living there. We also have the stories of the little people of Venezuela, this little tribe of little almost pygmies that are said to live in by Angel Falls in the Canaima area. People in modern times, actually quite recently, there was a trekker who treks up to Angel Falls, who her and her group stumbled upon a little tiny footprint.
Wow.
It's yeah, so there's so those two places I'm dying to go to, and hopefully we're getting closer and closer with Venezuela, with the first flights now leaving from Miami and going
Yes.
to Caracas, and the embassy opening up, which is nice. And next I would love to go to Cuba, because there's also the caves there are so fascinating. There's tons of burials. I mean, the ancient history of Cuba is, to me, is probably one of the most fascinating of all the Caribbean, just in terms of the diversity, the complexity, etc.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
As
so I'd
far
love
as
to see that documentary.
oh
Sounds
no, I can
fascinating.
find it. Yeah, I'll find it and send it to you. As a matter of fact, speaking of the little people there, Cherokee little people. There's
Ah,
have you
I have
heard
not.
that mentioned before? Yeah, I've had the opportunity to uh, have interviewed, had a couple of shows actually on the Cherokee little people, and it's just fascinating.
Wow.
Fascinating. Yeah, I'll send you some info on that. And
Yes.
it's funny that you
I would
mentioned
love
that
to see
because
that show.
having those legends, of little people down in South America, you know.
Yeah, and here in Aruba at the Malmuck Cemetery, which is one of the largest in the Caribbean and certainly the largest here in Aruba, it's an archaic cemetery where giant skeletons were buried their burials were in the shape of isosceles triangles. And there was, in the center of the Malmuck Cemetery was this a woman. She had a humped back, and she was the oldest burial that they found in terms of her age, and she was alone. So they believed that she was in charge of the whole civilization here in Aruba at that time, and that's what led me to believe, and other evidence, of course, that the ancient giants were a matriarchal society. But also, close by her, not with her, but close by her, was the burial of a little person. So oftentimes when you hear of giants, there will also always be little people involved too. And so
Uh-huh.
this little person, when the researchers investigated this person, they believed to be a male, but not really sure. They didn't have any deformities other than being small. They didn't have like rickets or any type of nutritional diseases or
Yes.
anything, and they appear to have just died of natural causes of potentially old age. It also appeared to the researchers that perhaps this person had been carried, given a very luxurious lifestyle,
Yes.
almost treated like a good luck charm.
Uh-huh.
And that the burial of the person was very ornate and very intricate, especially compared to the other burials found within the cemetery. So I was thinking about a time when my grandmother was alive. She was living in the state of Kansas and Arkansas as well. She was living on farms, and it was before even Kansas had statehood that she was living there. And
Oh wow.
she had all these sisters, one brother and all sisters, and the youngest one was my aunt, and she had blonde hair and blue eyes. So my grandmother remembered one day being in the house, and all of a sudden the chief of the tribe of Native Americans, who they essentially my great grandfather was leasing the land from, he came, and my grandmother described him. He was dark brown skin with no shirt on. He was totally muscular, long black hair. He was on this white horse, and he came to speak to her, my great great grandfather. They were very nervous. All the kids were in the house, and my grandmother's mother was in the house. And so her father went out and spoke to the chief, and the chief was carrying a little baby, and an Indian baby. So her father said, what do you want? And the chief said, no, we want to trade babies with you. We want the blonde hair, blue eye baby, and we'll give you one of our babies. So I think what my great great grandfather thought was and took away from is that maybe they wanted for like good luck, for like almost like a trophy, because she was so different from their genetics.
Yeah.
So he and the chief felt like like it was going to happen, like it was a no-brainer. And my great great grandfather was like, wait, no, I'm not going to do that. So my grandfather was so scared, because the chief was angry. He had gone all this way and brought this baby and wanted the baby. And was appeared to be denied nothing by anyone. So for nights and nights and nights, my great grandfather would sit on the porch with a shotgun, making sure that the chief didn't come back and steal the baby. And nothing ever occurred. But hearing that story, it made me think about maybe if there was communication between, since Aruba is only 16 miles off the coast of Venezuela, if there had been communication between the giants and the mainland people of Venezuela, perhaps they had done some sort of a trade. Maybe they traded a giant for a little person. And that's why this little person was, because it's the only little person on the entire cemetery. So if this was something that was had a genetic component and would be passed down, where were the other little people? There had to be some sort of, not just one isolated incident. There would be several, I would think. So that's what always made me, and the fact that the little person was carried and given this elite burial, they were treated more like a charm than and something special that they had, rather than someone who was deformed or maybe someone who was marginalized for being different. They were actually celebrated for being different. So I often think, was there a trade that went on with the Little People tribe in Canaima, Venezuela, and the giants? It's something to think about. We'll probably never know, but it's just another interesting facet of the giants here. I'm sorry?
Two smallest persons in the world.
Right.
I was watching some content on YouTube. It was very interesting because one of them was in Iran.
Oh, wow.
I believe he's like 23 years old, and he is small.
Oh, he's still alive.
Yes. And I think the other one's in India, and she gets carried around.
Oh, interesting.
She lives like a life of,
wow.
And in India, there's so many religions in India.
Right, of course.
And of course in Iran was just, there was so much, I would say, like, respect for that, for this individual.
Right.
You know what I mean? They didn't treat him like anything, like an oddity or anything like that.
Right.
As a matter of fact, his father carried him around.
Wow.
And yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Where he went, I mean, the people were just, flowering him with showering him with love.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
Ah.
And so, of course, that curiosity runs into all of us, correct?
Right, of course.
Yes, I can imagine, back in that time, what it was like.
Right.
It's a rarity. It's something that you don't see.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating now that you're telling me this about other cultures that are still doing this, revering almost the little people for the differences that they have, as opposed to marginalizing them for being different. So that's very interesting. There could be a whole research just on, that type of dynamic that's from the past going into now and why that
Yep.
occurs. So that's very, very interesting.
No. Well, I'll tell you what. You're going to be fascinated with the Cherokee Little People
Yes,
and
yes.
those stories and legends. I mean, it's
I'm
a matter of fact, I
interested.
got a book, and I'll share the book with you.
Oh,
Right after
great.
we're done with the show, and I'll think you'll enjoy it.
Thank
But there's,
you.
I mean, a lot of these things are so interconnected. Also,
Right,
you know
I
what I mean?
agree.
They're not. It is amazing to me to, and I shouldn't be surprised, but some of these discoveries are still being. I'm not surprised that a lot of it's being contained. Also, you know what I mean?
I
I'm
agree.
surprised, as a matter of fact, that you didn't get more pushback from the folks in the Netherlands. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
I know the last time we spoke, you had mentioned something like that.
Right.
That some of the academics up in the Netherlands weren't too like welcoming,
Right.
to this research.
Well, it's interesting because now in Aruban, there's a lot of Aruban groups on Aruba groups on Facebook, and
Uh-huh.
one of them is about nature and culture of Aruba, and it's run by Arubans. And one of the Arubans posted that the Kakateo were the original colonizers of Aruba, and the Kakateo were the ones that were potentially connected to the Teano and came after. The giants were already here, and the Kakateo came after and came to the island. Of course, they couldn't fight off the giants and ended up living with them side by side. But to hear the Arubans saying that, which I've always said, the first people who were here were the giants, and then these outsiders came in. So they were the first real colonizers because they came from outside. The giants were already here. They were totally established. And then all of a sudden, this new tribe of people comes in. Fortunately for the giants, they were giants. So there wasn't really much of a battle that could have been accomplished, and let alone won by the Kakateo. To see finally, after all these years, that the mindset of the Aruban people, and then seeing how, I couldn't just do it alone, right? I've been talking for almost 20 years about the giants, but now to see when the anthropologist was pretty much verbally attacked for saying essentially the same thing, that the Kakateo came after the giants and were not from Venezuela and Colombia. They were from the northern parts of the Caribbean, but not Cuban. And then seeing the pushback there. And then also there's a woman who runs an indigenous group here on the island. She also happens to be an attorney. And she sent me some messages one time on Facebook, like, why do you keep saying that there were giants here? There were no giants. I'm friends with the head of archaeology, and he never told me that. And now the head of archaeology was also my ex-boyfriend. So I know for sure he knows that there are giants. He's just reading off a script, and that's essentially exactly what's happening. And I said, look, go to him and tell him I told you, and tell him to tell you the truth, because he's not telling you the truth about who was originally here on the island. And then finally, about 2 or 3 months ago, she contacted a friend of mine, and she told him, an Aruban friend, she told him, he admitted to me finally that there were giants on the island. It was the first time, and all this time he hadn't been telling me the truth. So now she doesn't trust him. So, which is interesting, because I've been vindicated, but I don't really need to be vindicated, because I know I was telling the truth, and I knew my information was accurate, and a lot of which I got from the head of archaeology, as a matter of fact. So to see now the people actually living through having their own lived experiences of dealing with academia, and seeing what they're telling you and what's actually occurring, and then you're witnessing it right before your eyes in real time, and seeing the Aruban people, their wheels begin to spin, like, what else have they been telling us that is totally not true, or just a guess, or they're doing it on purpose, to keep us down as a people from our own people. Then it's really, I wouldn't say rewarding, because I don't feel, or vindicate. I wouldn't use those words, but definitely it's nice to finally see that they can see what I've seen for a long, long time. And I think
Right.
now we're seeing more and more and more people waking up to the fact that even though you've been told a certain thing, just because the person has a PhD or, went to college for far too long and did some field research, doesn't make them an expert, doesn't make them the final say. And perhaps on purpose, they're not telling you and disclosing to you everything that they actually know. And so there's been that change of mindset starting slowly on the island here as well. And it's fine. I'm happy. I'm happy to see the veil has slipped and that the people are waking up.
Yes. And I think it's because of the advent, because of the social media. A lot of the
Also.
social media really interconnects everybody.
Exactly.
And then all these, I would say, the folk stories or oral
Right.
history
Yes.
that's gotten passed down. Starts, it starts taking some traction. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And you have persevered, with this research. I think anybody else would have probably just, tossed the hat. You know what I mean? And just,
Yes.
hang it up.
Right.
But you have persevered, and you should be, you should feel good.
Oh, thank you. Yes,
You
I
should.
always say the Giants, I didn't choose the Giants chose me. So that's why I
No,
can't
that's-
escape them. Every time
Yeah.
you think I've figured everything out, then some other new information will come into place. It's really like an onion, and it's quite interesting because the more questions you ask, the more questions you have. So even if
yeah.
you get answers
know.
to some of the questions, then you have more questions. So it's rather
Correct.
intriguing dealing with the giants down here in Aruba and Bonaire and Curaçao, but very rewarding.
Oh yeah. Now, as far as going back to the Netherlands, do the Netherlands currently have a lot of the artifacts?
They
You know?
do. Yes, they do. And how many, we don't know. Not all are on public display. Some of them are at the University of Leiden. So they have like the majority of them, to be honest. Unfortunately, they have them cloistered away, and some of them, as I said, are on public display. Aruba got 2 artifacts back, one more recently than the last one. Very strange artifacts, strange ceramic pottery bowl, which is very weird. And then a burial urn as well with a bizarre
Wow.
face on it. So it's very interesting. And so when we go to the archaeology museum here in Aruba, you're only seeing such a small sliver of what they've actually uncovered here. If you go to Curaçao, you'll see more, but a lot of that was been taken from Curaçao as well, and Bonaire. But what's interesting about all 3 islands is that they all have similar artifacts. So
Yes.
there definitely was one civilization living on the 3 islands and making very, very similar artifacts. So, but the Netherlands has a majority of things that the Aruban people don't even know about, unfortunately.
Wow. Do you think they're playing the same, let's say, they get the same attitudes as the Smithsonian does?
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
with the,
Yes, and
You know,
you're
it's-
right. Of course. And they probably have a lot of the bones, too. I know for sure. Because when I tried to track down the 2 skeletons that were unearthed here at the Malmuck Cemetery that were last seen in the Curaçao Museum, which underwent a renovation, and then the skulls went missing. So when I went to Curaçao and I spoke to the head of the museum and I asked him where are the skulls, he said, "Oh, well, let me call the archaeology museum, but it's not a museum. It's called the Memory Management Museum. But it's not a museum at all. It's just an archaeological office managing people's memories, which is so bizarre."
Interesting.
And the curator and the head of the museum, and the Curaçao Museum, contacted the head of the Memory Management Museum and asked if they had the 2 skulls because they had been in his museum and now they're gone. And the person who answered the phone would neither confirm nor deny that they had the skulls, which is just so bizarre. It's the strangest answer. It doesn't make any sense, and it just leads more mystery and ideas that perhaps there's a cover up of some sort going on, and they don't want people to see these artifacts and these burials and these remains.
Heather, the islands, right? The 3 islands, they're pretty much independent, correct?
From the Netherlands?
Yes.
Or
Are they still independent from the Netherlands, or are they still?
No, they're all 3 part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So,
Okay.
for example, the King was just here. We celebrate King's Day. All 3 islands celebrate King's Day. Also, I think it was the Prime Minister from the Netherlands was just here, I think, yesterday. So, no, Bonaire is 100% part of the Netherlands. So, for example, if you have a Dutch passport and you're from Amsterdam and you want to live in Bonaire, you can just fly down and live in Bonaire. With Curaçao and Aruba, you have to if you're a Dutch person from the Netherlands, you have to get a lot of paperwork and get your residency, and kind of like how everyone else has to do it who's a non-Aruban or non-Curaçaoan born person. So in that sense, that they are a little bit separate, but ultimately they're all part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So these are all just outposts in the south.
Not completely autonomous.
I'm sorry? Exactly. They are not completely autonomous at all. We have the Dutch Army here. We have the Dutch Marines here. We have the Dutch Coast Guard. So, they're not. They're really part of the kingdom still.
So all the academic schools that they really call the shots when it's concerned.
Exactly. That's exactly it, yes.
Archaeological
As a matter
findings.
of fact, the Archaeology Museum here in Aruba, their sister museum, who helped fund the building of the museum here, is the Smithsonian. So that's another layer of...
Why isn't that a surprise?
I know, isn't it? It's absolutely incredible. So yeah, that's another aspect that's part of it that's intriguing and maybe holding things back.
Those tentacles are very long and they extend.
I say that all the time. Yes, the tentacles run deep from the Smithsonian.
Yes. This is fascinating, Heather. I mean, and I hope that we get to do another show.
I do too. I love it. I love speaking with you, Willie. You're always well informed and have great questions and input.
Thank you. I really want to, when I send you this info, maybe we could talk about it, and I know there's like a huge connection there, even though the Taínos and, that there is a separation there, but it's very fascinating.
Yes, I can't wait to see what you mentioned. I'd love to see that.
You're gonna get a kick out of it.
Good.
You are.
Great.
You are. But listen, thank you so much for being my guest. This is my 3rd episode, and to the people listening out there, if you like this content, please like and subscribe, and of course, I'm going to be putting up your links
Thank you.
on the description of the video also.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I really hope to make it to Aruba one of these days.
Yes.
All the islands are so beautiful.
They're
so unique in their own way. They're so unique.
Yes, come down anytime, Willie. I'd love to take you on a tour.
Oh, it'd be great. As far as the islands are concerned, I think they're just some of the most beautiful things that God created.
Yeah, I agree.
It's those islands. As much as you want to, you miss the stateside. You know what I mean? You get pulled back. You get pulled back to that island. And when you get to that island and you smell that air.
Right, I'm under Aruba smell.
Yes. When those doors open and you just leave the air-conditioned confines.
Yes, and it's beautiful.
That hot air hits you in the the face. Which is, you don't complain. You know what I mean? Because we both have gone through our fair share of winters. You know what I mean? We live in the Northeast.
Exactly.
So it's the brutal winters. You know what I mean? And then you go down to one of these islands and you're like, oh my God, there is a God.
Yes. I was there. Why was I living like that for all those years? And I could have been living like this,
I mean, tell me about it. Sometimes I feel like when my mom immigrated to Chicago.
Right.
Okay. It was like I left this beautiful little historical town and ended up in the concrete jungle. You know what I mean?
Right.
On the south side of Chicago, and it's like,
With
you know,
horrible winters. Horrible in Chicago.
horrible winters,
Oh my God.
horrible. You know, it was like, oh yeah, it looks cute on TV. You know what I mean? But
Right.
when you live in it,
Yes. That's why I tried to explain to the people here in Aruba, like, oh, I want to see the snow. Said, look, it's not like the Hallmark Channel. I mean,
yes,
it takes you 10 minutes just to get dressed to go out to shovel. I mean,
yeah,
it's a big
yeah,
process.
and it gets old quick.
Yes, it does.
It gets old quick.
Yes.
It does.
I said they're
It
not
does.
showing you after like 2 days when the snow's all black from all the dirt. And
The slush.
yeah, the slush. They're not showing you that on the Hallmark shows.
It's like frozen mud. You know what I mean?
Yes. Oh, I don't miss it. I don't miss it.
No, I hear you. I hear you. But Heather, again, thank you so much, you know, for being my guest. And, you know, I hope you make it over here soon.
Oh, well,
All right.
thank you. Thanks so much,
Thank you
Willie.
so
Thanks
much.
for having me. I'm so honored to be on your new show and one of your first guests. So I'm very happy that we got to speak again, and I got to see you, even if it's not personally, and we got to
Yeah.
talk more about the Giants, my favorite topic.
Of course. Thank you very much, Heather.
Thank you, Willie.
Take care now.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the Paradigm Matrix with your host, Willie Miranda. This has been the Paradigm Matrix hosted by Willie Miranda.